chilling encounters with religious idols that will make you scream in terror, spooky sightings of gigantic creatures you won't believe are real, and the shadowy apparition of a creature from Vietnamese folklore that sank the morale of the U.S. Army during the war. Get ready, because if you stay with us, you'll learn the real horror behind these 10 unknown beings seen in the Vietnam War. Number 10. Idols and fanatics. Technology gave us a possibility of contacting people from all over the world. That's why Reddit has become an ideal place to get amazing stories, such as the one narrated by a terminally ill Vietnam veteran who has given a testimony of something chilling and unknown from his time as a soldier. Apparently, this man was part of the nicknamed Army Tunnel Rats. The mission of these soldiers was to infiltrate tunnels dug by the enemy in order to eradicate the troops hiding there. This was a common mission in Vietnam, but at the time, he and his partner penetrated an unusual dark place that was hidden under a tarp. Descending into the depths, they found an ancient staircase, which had probably been there for centuries and led to a gloomy scene. In the middle of a dark room, about 12 Vietnamese soldiers were completely paralyzed. They were breathing, but showed no sign of life. Despite shining their flashlights into these men's eyes, none of them stood up or even made the effort to blink. They were all completely mesmerized by the sculpture of a naked woman with 8 tentacles. The scene was chilling. There was no explanation, but they didn't wait too long to find one. The soldiers left the place, placed some dynamite at the entrance, and tried to forget that story for the rest of their lives. Number 9. The creatures of the forest. The next story is from the accounts of the U.S. Marines, who made their way through much of Vietnam until they came across something creepy. The natives said that creepy specters lurked in the heart of the forest, ghosts of long-dead men and women who roamed the treetops looking for souls to haunt. These entities were called Ma, and despite local warnings, the troops advanced through the thick jungle and lush forest, believing that the greatest danger they would encounter was perhaps some poisonous snakes. However, as they penetrated the undergrowth, they discovered that the words were real. Strange shadows moved among the trees. They were lifeless, reanimated bodies that jumped between the tops of the trees and watched the soldiers with intense black eyes. From that year on, disappearances in the forest increased dramatically. The soldiers who entered took a long time to leave, and when the bodies of those who didn't make it were found, they appeared disfigured and full of human bites. This type of attack continued during the whole time that the American troops remained in the area, and although the casualties suffered by the Army were never made public, the figure amounts to hundreds of soldiers who left this world seeing the tenebrous maw of Vietnam with their own eyes. Number 8. Humanoids. Another of the encounters most often mentioned by Vietnam veterans also occurred in the woods, but unlike the strange ghostly figures mentioned above, they encountered creatures that are difficult to describe. Most describe them as strange hairy humanoids that hid in the depths of the forest and in numerous mines and caves. The natives had a name to define these beasts. They called them Noi Rong, which means the beings of the forest. Legends claim that these infernal creatures were monsters created to torment human beings. Hence, they were covered with abundant red hair and had such a fragile temperament that any noise could drive them mad. These humanoids are also frequently described as caloric and muscular apes that exceed 5 feet in height. The most curious thing about this matter is that both the American forces and those belonging to the Viet Cong side denounced attacks at the hands of these monstrous beasts. However, not a single specimen was ever caught, and there was no way to unravel what lay behind this chilling mystery. Number 7. Sea snakes. Craig Thompson was a member of the 503rd Battalion of the Parachute Infantry Regiment when his platoon was confronted by a creature he could never get out of his head. It happened while the team was taking a dip in the waters of the Bong Son River. One of the soldiers pointed out a rippling shape approaching at a high rate of speed. Craig knew he couldn't escape, but he tried anyway. The beast was about 50 feet long and 10 feet wide, and its body protruded from the water. The river seemed to be not deep enough to support such dimensions, and when it finally emerged, Craig could see the creature in all its chilling splendor. It was a huge creature with a square head, golden scales, and grotesque jaw that revealed a completely black and chilling inner skin when opened. In the presence of this being, panic gripped the soldiers. Their training had never prepared them to face a monster from the underworld, but fortunately, one of the sentries acted swiftly and opened fire on the creature, which immediately moved away, leaving the poor soldiers completely frightened and convinced that they had witnessed the appearance of a monster worthy of their darkest nightmares. Number 6. Giant spiders. It seems that the forests of Vietnam were a major scene of the creepy. This place undoubtedly marked an entire generation, and anyone can come to understand the horror experienced by the veterans of this war when hearing the stories of the famous Vietnamese giant spiders. For decades, cryptozoologists from all over the world have tried to decipher the veracity of these claims. Many have plunged deep into the jungles to face the horror of the area head-on. And while many have found amazing creatures, none compared to the famous giant spiders here. Hundreds of soldiers belonging to the exploration unit testified about these creatures. Most describe them as spiders between 5 and 10 inches in wingspan, which emerged from the caverns of the forest and attacked clueless soldiers who were sent out to hunt for food. Sometimes shooting at these spiders was useless. They had a prodigious agility, and there are so many reports of seeing the same creatures in other places, such as mountains and caves. They all describe the creatures with the same characteristics, which makes it difficult for it to be a simple invention of the soldiers, don't you think? Number 5. Crawling monsters. The following case tells the story of an army photographer who was recording the area from a helicopter when he noticed something strange in the surrounding jungle just below him. From above, he could clearly see a strange shape blending into the green of the trees and the brown of the earth. Intrigued by the movement, he asked the pilot to descend slowly so that he could capture whatever was moving down there with his camera. As he did so, the photographer was transfixed. Camouflaged among the colors of the forest, there was a giant snake more than 90 feet long and with a monstrously large body. Its grotesque head resembled that of a horse, and upon seeing the low altitude of the helicopter, the creature lunged at the intruders. Its attacks were to no avail, but they came close to hitting the helicopter. Apparently, the photographer managed to capture several images of the creature, but his photographs became part of the military and were classified as confidential. However, both the photographer and the helicopter pilot remember very clearly what they saw that day. Number 4. Strange creatures. In 1974, as the war was coming to a stalemate, a disturbing event was reported involving a group of soldiers on a search and destroy mission in northern Vietnam. The soldiers came to a clearing falling from the mountains, but they noticed something unusual at that moment. The area was completely silent. Not a single living thing made a sound. This was strange since the territory was full of insects and various species of animals. Immediately, the soldiers put themselves on guard and began to explore the surroundings until they found what seemed to be the cause of the strange situation. On the mountainside, a few meters away, the soldiers managed to distinguish a group of large humanoids that exceeded 8 feet in height. They had bright yellow skin and their hands were composed of 3 simple fingers. Their heads were flat and their faces had 2 large reddish eyes. The image was simply terrifying. None of the soldiers could believe what was in front of them, and their first impulse was to open fire, but the squad leader stopped them. This was too dangerous, and he ordered everyone to retreat to the base. Upon returning, the captain gave reports of what had happened, and according to this man's account, the matter was left to an independent army commission, which apparently took charge of it. Number 3. Humanoid Lizard. The following story comes from the ranks of food soldiers, troops who were sent as scouts to the most dangerous places during the war. Precisely on one of these missions, a platoon came across something that to this day remains an enigma to the U.S. Army. According to the report, the troops followed the trail of enemy soldiers who had infiltrated U.S. lines and upon discovery fled through a strange cave system that ran through the mountains. Plunging into the darkness, the men began to fear for their own lives. The place emitted a rancid, putrid odor. The lantern lights barely managed to illuminate the path, and it seemed that there was nothing in the 130 feet deep cave. But then they came across a creature never seen before. All the soldiers described it as a creature 6 feet long and in the shape of a humanoid lizard that moved evasively and emitted an unnatural sound. Its large yellow eyes looked frightened, and its jaw hid dozens of deformed, sharp teeth. The group was about to open fire, but it didn't need to. The creature fled through the deep caves, and when the soldiers followed it, they discovered that the tunnel plunged deeper and deeper. No soldier dared to chase the creature, and after reporting what they had seen, the army filled the place with dynamite and let the weight of the earth and stones plug the creepy hole. Number 2. Extraterrestrials. It's impossible to believe that in times of war there's no record related to UFOs, and Vietnam is no exception. In the year 1967, a 6-man long-range reconnaissance patrol was in the jungle that separates North and South Vietnam when something strange happened at 1:45 a.m. The group, mostly asleep, awoke only to witness a startling event. Before them, a strange creature was watching them with great attention. It was a small being with a humanoid appearance, grayish skin, deep-set black eyes, long limbs, and a strange glow coming from its chest, which illuminated the whole place in the middle of the night. The men, completely frightened by the apparition, let their training act for them. They quickly grabbed their weapons and fired at the creature. Its blood was bluish and thick, but before they could get close enough, an invisible force completely paralyzed their bodies. Just above their heads, 3 lights of an intense yellow color landed on them, and while they were immobilized, they saw the creature rise to what was undoubtedly a strange flying object. Once the creature was gone, they fell asleep into a deep slumber and were completely asleep until the next day. What was this creature? The soldiers never dared to talk about it. They only confessed what they had experienced in their old age when death was about to take them away, and they wished to confess that chilling encounter they had experienced in Vietnam. Number 1. The Bird Woman. We come to the most disturbing of the Vietnam stories, which took place in June 1972, when Earl Morrison, a Marine Corps Private First Class, was on guard duty near the Da Nang bunker. That night, nothing seemed out of place, but then, in the middle of the thick forest, something emerged that Earl could never forget. Before his eyes, a strange glow appeared. It was coming from the sky, quickly descending to the area and landing on the ground. Turned into a flying humanoid with large bat-like wings and a naked body. Gradually, the soldier recognized that it was a woman with long flowing hair, skin the color of charcoal, and a murderous gaze. Her movements were smooth and slow. Nothing seemed to disturb her. But before the man could raise the alarm, the creature pounced on him and gave him a sharp blow that knocked him out. Upon awakening, the man was subject to intense interrogation. He had serious wounds all over his body, but no enemy had attacked the base. This was very strange, but it became more disturbing when they discovered that there was a woman who fit the description perfectly in Vietnamese folklore. Locally, she was known as a female warrior who had watched over the people of this country since ancient times. The story was silenced and concealed, but the army troops quickly got wind of it and apparently understood that the land was guarded by an unknown force that no one wished to cross. It's surprising that in all places where war events occur, there are always chilling events and sightings of creatures that have never been seen before. It seems that death attracts all kinds of perverse beings, and if you think this is the only time something like this has happened, you'd better get ready to discover the truth behind everything you know. Join us in the heart of war, and you'll learn what seems to be impossible, but thousands of soldiers claim is real. Very real.